An alien vampire queen was about to be destroyed by her own kind, but a brave human soldier saved her. Kyle Wren had always thought the universe would end with a bang, or at least a decent fireball. Instead, it started to unravel with a form stamped, authorized termination of subject, Syraxa Ver, high blood variant. The stamp was digital, the authorization forged, and the paperwork excessively tidy. That alone was reason enough to suspect something was wrong. Nobody that high up in the Concordium hierarchy ever did anything cleanly, unless they were trying to bury something alive. He scrolled through the declassified intel packet while sucking down the last of his synth calf. It tasted like burnt despair and metal shavings, but it kept his brain ticking. According to the briefing, Syraxa was not just dangerous. She was irreparably anomalous. Evolution gone sideways. A deviation from her own kind's bloodthirsty perfection. A queen without a throne. A predator who had learned to think too much. That was the official narrative. The unofficial one, gathered from intercepted whispers, half-redacted reports, and Kale's growing gut feeling that something stank worse than the Vulture Lounge's restroom back on Titan Station, told a different story. She was being executed not because she was a threat to the galaxy. She was being executed because she had dared to change. And in an empire built on tradition and hierarchy, change was the true heresy. Minty, Kale said, speaking to the snide AI embedded in his ocular HUD. Remind me again why I'm considering breaking half a dozen military protocols, stealing a drop pod, and going full rogue to save an alien vampire queen I've never met. Because you're bored, emotionally constipated, and haven't had a date since that botanist dumped you for a sentient fern, Minnie replied sweetly. Also, your moral compass is fatally intact. I really miss when AIs didn't have personalities. You selected the sarcastic assistant package, Kale. Twice. He grunted, snapping his magnetic armor plates into place with practiced ease. The Valiant Echo was currently in low orbit over Nix 9, a Class F quarantine planet wrapped in permanent dusk and atmospheric interference thick enough to choke radar. Perfect place to quietly execute royalty without too many questions. The kind of place you go when you don't want the truth to come back. Cal had once led a breach team into a collapsing neutron facility full of psychotic nanoswarms and less than friendly gravity. This felt more dangerous, because this time, it wasn't about protocol or rank or doing his duty. This time, it was about choice, and he hated choosing. It always led to paperwork. He made it to the launch bay just in time to duck behind a power loader as a pair of deck officers passed by, deep in argument over ration allocations. Once they were gone, Cal hopped into Drop Pod 14, nicknamed the Coffin, for its charming habit of jamming its ejection sequence mid-burn, and started the override. Minty grumbled about heat shielding and dismemberment. Kale hummed an old Terran folk song about bar fights and bad decisions. When the launch clamps disengaged with a sound like a giant's knuckles cracking, the pod dropped like a stone into Nix 9's swirling storm belt. Lightning danced across the sky like it was auditioning for a space opera, and Kale found himself laughing. It wasn't a heroic laugh. It was the kind of laugh you made when you realized this was either the dumbest thing you'd ever done or the beginning of something that would change everything. 3 minutes later, the pod slammed into Nix 9's crust hard enough to knock the wind out of him and trigger Minty's crash damage checklist. Vitals intact, Minty said. Pod integrity, questionable. Sanity, presumed compromised. Sounds about right, Kyle muttered, popping the hatch and stepping into a landscape that looked like a graveyard had fallen in love with a volcano. Black spires jutted from the ground like the bones of ancient titans, and crimson fog clung to the air in slow pulsing waves. Nix 9 wasn't just ominous, it tried to be ominous. It probably rehearsed. His objective was buried beneath the ruins of the first spire, a place the Ver called the silencing chamber. Because of course they did. You don't execute your queen in something called the cozy room. He made his way across the obsidian fields, dodging automated perimeter drones and a surprise patrol of blood metal sentries that tried to perforate him with plasma pikes. He handled it the old-fashioned way. A pulse rifle, a misused EMP grenade, and a lot of yelling. Minty counted 9 confirmed kills and 3 accidental dance moves. The silencing chamber loomed ahead, carved into the base of a collapsed tower like a forgotten cathedral. Its entrance shimmered with ancient force fields that tasted like copper and regret when Kale passed through them. Inside it was colder than vacuum and lit by violet bioluminescent veins crawling through the stone. And there she was, chained at the center of a circular dais, arms spread, head bowed. Her hair floated unnaturally, as if the air around her disagreed with gravity. Her ears were long and elegant, tapering like starlight blades. Her skin shimmered in tones that refused to stay in the human color spectrum, and her eyes, when they lifted to meet his, were not red or gold, but the deep, aching blue of collapsing stars. Kyle wasn't religious, but he suddenly understood why people built temples. She didn't speak, not at first, just watched him with the kind of gaze that measured your weight in lifetimes. Then her lips parted. "You're not one of mine." Kyle exhaled slowly. I'm the idiot who dropped in from orbit with a broken pod and an even worse plan." She tilted her head. "You're human. Last I checked." She smiled faintly, as if the concept of human was some ancient joke only now becoming funny. "You don't even know me." Kyle stepped forward, scanning the chains. They were made of light, refracted through crystal matrices older than Earth's oceans. He'd have to improvise. Again. "I know enough," he said. "You're going to die for that," she murmured. Kyle grinned, heart pounding, weapon raised, mind racing. "Yeah," he said, "but maybe not today." She laughed then, soft, sharp, and terrifying. And in that moment, Kale Wren knew two things. One, he was completely, irrevocably screwed. And two, he wouldn't have it any other way. Kyle was starting to think that, despite the apocalypse aesthetic and execution themed decor, the silencing chamber had a certain charm. It wasn't the kind of place you'd bring a date, unless the date was into ancient blood rituals and ominous lighting. But then again, Saraxa didn't look like the picnic type. She was watching him with a detached sort of curiosity, the way someone might study an insect that had accidentally learned to play chess. "You really are human," she said again, as if she were still wrapping her mind around it. Cal yanked a multi-tool from his belt and crouched beside the bindings at her feet, which pulsed like restrained lightning. "You say that like it's an illness." She tilted her head, long ears twitching with the movement. "You're here alone. That surprises you. Humans don't do anything alone. They bring fire teams, data mines, backup plans." Kyle smirked without looking up. "I left all that in my other pants." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. The air around them pulsed and Kyle's tool sparked uselessly against the containment matrix. He swore under his breath and tried again with a different frequency modulator. "I assume you have a plan?" she asked. "Oh, absolutely," Kale said. "Step 1. Land on a forbidden planet with no permission, minimal prep, and a high likelihood of instant disintegration. Step 2. Crack an alien prison system I don't understand using tools I bought from a shady merchant who once sold me a wristwatch that measured dreams. Step 3. Improvise." She blinked. "You're insane." "Not insane, just aggressively curious." The containment matrix hissed and sputtered as Kale wedged the tool into a seam. Sparks leapt across his glove. He ignored them. The queen, chained and still as ice, watched him without flinching. Her voice dropped slightly. "They will come for you, your people." Kale grunted, tapping the modulator. "They already are, but it's fine. Earth Command probably wanted to court-martial me anyway. I once used a stealth drone to cook noodles during a Black Ops mission." Saraxa's brow arched delicately. "That sounds like a very human problem." "Hey, ramen doesn't stop being delicious just because you're surrounded by radioactive insurgents." There was a click, a sharp final sound, and the first shackle disengaged. Energy hissed into the stone and vanished. Kale barely had time to register the shift before she moved. Not to attack, but to kneel forward, gasping. Her breath came in shallow draws, and Kale noticed how her hands trembled, the way her skin flickered with unstable luminescence. "You okay?" he asked, hovering awkwardly. "No." Her voice was iron over glass. "But I will be." He moved to the second shackle, then the third. As he worked, she spoke, haltingly, as if unused to sharing the weight of words. "They said I was infected, that I had become something corrupted, a mutation in the royal genome." "Right," Kale muttered, "because the real problem with royalty is when they start growing a conscience. That earned him a laugh, a quiet, startling thing, rich and rough around the edges. It echoed in the chamber, softer than the hum of failing force fields. I began to feel things, she said. Not just hunger, not just dominance, guilt, wonder, curiosity. The others called it weakness. Cal paused, meeting her eyes. Sounds like evolution to me. You sound like a poet. God, no. I once tried writing a sonnet in flight school and accidentally insulted 3 species in a major lunar holiday. The final shackle resisted him until he overclocked the modulator, at which point it exploded with enough force to throw him on his back. He stared at the ceiling, dazed. Minty, he croaked. Status? You are alive, concussed, and flat on your back like a turtle with self-esteem issues. Perfect. Syraxa stood slowly, unshackled at last. She moved with the poise of a predator that had simply paused for dramatic effect. Her body still trembled, her aura sparking with erratic energy, but she held herself like royalty, battered but never broken. Cal staggered to his feet and tried not to look like he needed a nap in a juice box. I assume there's a way out of here? He asked. There is, she said, through the bone gate, but the Dralk will be waiting. Of course they will. They moved together through the corridor, deeper into the substructure. The walls whispered, literally. Old psionic tech murmured fragmented thoughts as they passed. Cale caught words like traitor, rebirth, and why does this corridor smell like soup? Which he chose to ignore. So, he said as they crept down a winding ramp, these Dralk, I'm guessing they're not friendly neighborhood watch volunteers? They are machine flesh sentries grown in crucibles of blood and light, loyal to the Vare until death, and possibly beyond it. So, less hug you and more rip your spleen out through your kneecaps? Approximately. The bone gate came into view, an archway made of petrified organic matter, humming with residual intent. And guarding it, of course, were 2 Dralk, 9 feet tall, with silvered exoskeletons and eyes like molten iron. Their limbs split and reformed constantly, shifting between blades, claws, and some sort of appendage that Cale decided not to analyze. Syraxa took a step forward, but Cale stopped her. No offense, Your Majesty, but you look like you're one sneeze away from fainting. Let me try something first. He pulled out a pulse grenade and hurled it high, arcing over the guards. The explosion painted the hall in strobe blue and static. Cal followed it with 2 plasma bolts and a lot of running. The Dralk responded by screaming, not with mouths but through vibration. The sound scraped the air like a bone saw. One of them lunged. Kyle ducked, rolled, and fired again, yelling, Minty, give me something helpful. Suggestion, aim better. Wow, so useful. Syraxa raised her hand. Energy flared, uncontrolled, violent, and lashed out in a jagged arc. One Dralk seized and collapsed, circuitry boiling from within. She gasped, dropping to one knee. Kyle took down the second with a direct plasma shot to the cranial node and a lucky ricochet. As silence returned, Cale helped her up. We make a good team. We're not a team, she said, even as she leaned against him for support. Sure we are, Cale said, grinning. We've already killed stuff together. That's like step 2 in the universal buddy system. She didn't reply, but he could tell, beneath the exhaustion and the weight of centuries, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, the mad human with the bad jokes wasn't entirely useless. Together they stepped through the bone gate into the deeper dark. The tunnel beyond the bone gate breathed. Not metaphorically, it exhaled a slow stream of biothermal mist every 30 seconds, as if the structure itself had once been alive and simply hadn't realized it was supposed to stop. Cal kept his rifle pointed forward, mostly for comfort. The darkness ahead wasn't passive, it pressed back, like walking into the lungs of something ancient that still resented the idea of visitors. Syraxa moved beside him, slower than before, but with more presence, like her steps were reclaiming ownership of the very air. She hadn't spoken in a while, which Cal would have appreciated more if the silence didn't feel like it was sharpening its knives. His boots squelched against the organic tiles. That probably wasn't the scientific term, but it was the honest one. This is the worst date I've ever been on, he muttered. You were warned, Syraxis said, not quite smiling. I thought you meant danger. You didn't mention squishy floors. They absorb sound, she said, and sometimes blood. Oh, good, Kyle said. Functional and fashionably morbid. A low pulse ran through the walls. The light dimmed, then flared violet. Kyle tightened his grip. We're not alone. No, she agreed. We are being watched. He resisted the urge to look over his shoulder. Instead, he scanned the environment. By something with good taste in lighting and poor ventilation, a shape detached itself from the far wall with a sucking sound that made Cale's skin crawl. It stood roughly humanoid, though the proportions were all wrong. Too long, too narrow, and wrapped in semi-reflective armor that didn't reflect light so much as argue with it. Its face was a smooth panel of obsidian glass. No mouth, no eyes, just a narrow vertical seam like a waiting wound. Cal raised his rifle. Friend of yours? Syraxa tilted her head. A watcher, designed to study deviations. They don't speak. They just witness. Creepy. Agreed. The watcher moved aside, revealing a corridor sealed with a bone-laced membrane, pulsing gently. A door, Kyle assumed, if you were the kind of person who thought doors should have heartbeats. It's inviting us in, Syraxa said. Of course it is, Kyle muttered. Why couldn't we ever get chased by something normal, like a tax auditor or a rogue sock puppet eye? As they passed the watcher, it didn't move. Kyle tried not to stare at its mask. He felt like the more he looked, the more it saw, right down to the bones of his worst ideas. Beyond the membrane door lay a chamber flooded in pinkish blue light and filled with rows of translucent pods. Inside each pod, a humanoid figure floated, suspended in viscous fluid, their faces serene and empty. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Cal let out a low whistle. Tell me these are just really enthusiastic nap tubes. They are failed iterations, Syraxa said. Clones, experiments, attempts to replicate the royal line without its complexities, which is code for without your free will. She didn't answer, but her fingers clenched. Cal stepped closer to one of the pods. The figure inside looked like Syraxa, but not quite. The features were there, but the expression was wrong, vacant, hollow, as if someone had painted her soul on a screen and then unplugged the projector. Why keep them, he asked. If they didn't work? They want to remind me, she said, that I am a fluke, a defect in their design. Kyle stared at the silent rows. Well, they've got a real flair for passive aggression. A deep hum reverberated through the floor. The chamber responded, flickering. One of the pods sparked and collapsed inward, releasing a rush of fluid and a half-formed clone that writhed and twitched on the ground like a broken marionette. Cal jumped back. Okay, he said. That one wasn't sleeping. Syraxa stepped forward and placed her palm gently on the creature's brow. It stilled instantly. Not dead, just still. They're starting to decay, she said. Without me, the link collapses. The line dies. Which explains the panic in their genocide, Cale said. Not panic, she murmured. Desperation. The chamber lights began to flicker. A mechanical shriek echoed from the upper levels, like metal being tortured by time. Guessing that's not your royal welcome committee, Kyle said. Number, that's the failsafe. We're not supposed to be here. Right, because this place has such high hospitality standards. The floor beneath them shifted, literally. The pods began to sink, the walls retracting. Cal grabbed Syraxa and bolted for the far exit, marked by what appeared to be an actual neural archway. Fractal nerves threaded like vines around a darkened door. Minty, Cal barked as they ran. Navigation. I'd love to help, the AI responded, but this entire building is a sentient labyrinth designed by paranoid immortals who think GPS is a form of treason. So no map? Oh, I have a map. It's just insultingly wrong. Kyle swore and dove through the archway as it began to close. They tumbled into a sloped corridor that deposited them onto a platform overlooking what looked like a vertical tunnel lined with floating glyphs and violet propulsion rings. Syraxa staggered beside him. This is an escape conduit. That's the best sentence you've said today. It won't work without a key, she added. Kale turned to her. And where exactly is this key? She raised one elegant eyebrow. In me. He blinked. Oh, great. So I just plug you in? You really are human. Hey, I meant that in the most respectful way possible. She stepped to the edge of the platform, extended one glowing hand toward the glyphs, and whispered something that wasn't in any human language. The rings lit up, spinning into motion. The air thrummed. Cal stared at her, wind pulling at his jacket, adrenaline roaring in his ears. You sure this thing won't disintegrate us halfway up? No. All right, he said. Well, if we die, I'd like it noted that I went out on a date with an alien vampire queen, and it only mostly killed me. She smiled faintly. Noted. They leapt together. The conduit caught them midair and hurled them upward like stones launched from the wrath of a forgotten god. The walls screamed past in streaks of color and code, each ring accelerating them further. Kyle whooped as they climbed, half from terror, half from the sheer absurdity. Above them, light widened. Below them, death whispered. And somewhere in between, Kyle started to wonder what the hell he'd gotten himself into, and why. For the first time in years, it actually felt right. The propulsion rings spat them out into a massive chamber high above the old ruins, and Kale's first thought was that he'd accidentally launched himself into an alien opera house. The walls shimmered with resonant panels shaped like coral mouths, literal humming mouths, while the floor was a transparent platform suspended by nothing Kale could identify. There were no walls, not really, just layers of refracted starlight and some very confident architectural decisions. He hit the platform in a graceless sprawl. Saraxa landed next to him with far more dignity, which Kale found mildly insulting. Okay, he wheezed, staring at the glowing ceiling that might have been made of hard light or overachieving jellyfish. That was not how I usually travel between floors. It's the ceremonial lift, Saraxa said, brushing herself off, reserved for heirs. Do the heirs usually scream halfway up? But the architects were known sadists. Of course they were. From the far end of the chamber, an orb drifted toward them, about the size of a human head, coated in segmented plates with a soft blue light pulsing at its core. It chirped once, then projected a series of holographic glyphs in the air, none of which Kale could read, but they looked urgent and possibly condescending. It's a sentinel, Saraxa murmured. It scans for integrity breaches in the bloodline. Kale raised a brow. And we care about this, why? Because if it doesn't like what it finds, it summons the immolator drones. Oh, good. I love meeting new people. The orb buzzed and floated closer, beams of light beginning to flicker across Saraxa's body. She stood tall, chin lifted, the picture of imperious royalty who happened to also glow faintly and may or may not explode if judged incorrectly. Kel edged to the side just in case spontaneous combustion was part of the ceremony. The orb made a flat droning noise and turned its beam on Kyle. Hey, Kyle barked. That's personal. It's confused, Saraxa said. Because I'm human? Because you're with me. Well, technically, I saved your life, destroyed some of your enemies, and cracked several incredibly illegal locks for you. But yes, also that. The orb hovered, silent. Then with a sound like a disappointed librarian, it beeped twice and projected a narrow path of light toward a spiral bridge that hadn't existed a moment ago. I guess we passed, Kel said, temporarily. Do I get a sticker? Maybe a loyalty card? The path led them through a corridor suspended in open space. Below them, clouds drifted over alien mountains, and far above, a shattered moon hung like a cracked eye. Kyle tried not to look down. He preferred his walking surfaces non-transparent and devoid of sudden death. At the end of the bridge, a door shaped like a sigil opened with a soft chime. Inside, Kale found something he absolutely hadn't expected. A lounge. Not a creepy alien lounge. No haunted biometal or twitching vines. Just a long room with plush seating, a central console glowing with blue data, and what looked suspiciously like a minibar. Kyle said. This was my father's war chamber, Saraxa said. He believed comfort made strategy more effective. Now that's a ruler I can relate to. Cal wandered over to the console. The display showed tactical schematics, fleet positions, planetary defenses, even human systems mapped in eerie detail. Kale said, is this thing updated in real time? Yes. He blinked. That's Earth's third orbital fleet. I'm pretty sure even Earth doesn't know where it is. My people have eyes everywhere, she said softly. We had to. Survival demanded omniscience. Cal tapped the side of the display, squinting. And I suppose this section labeled strategic subjugation paths is just hypothetical? No, she said. It was our plan to subdue humanity once the bloodline was secured. Neat, Cale muttered. Always nice to know your girlfriend's people were planning to conquer your planet. I'm not your girlfriend. It's early days. A soft chime interrupted them. The console shifted. A figure appeared in the center of the room. A projection, but rendered in such high detail that Cale took a step back instinctively. It was a woman, regal and severe, with Syrax's features, minus the warmth. Her ears were longer, her posture crueler. My mother, Syraxa said. The figure spoke without preamble. Daughter, if you are hearing this, then you have escaped. You are either stronger than we anticipated or weaker than we feared. Kyle crossed his arms. Seems like a very supportive household. We created you to be perfect, the hologram continued, but you became curious, disobedient, infected by individualism. Kyle leaned in. Oh no, not individualism, anything but that. You were supposed to inherit the stars, the Queen's image went on, not question why we took them. The projection flickered, then shifted to a battle map. Dozens of systems marked in red, flashing alerts. They've activated the VAIR protocol, Syraxa said. That sounds bad. It is, it's the final purge. If they can't have the bloodline, they'll erase everything it touched. Cale pointed at one blinking sector. That's a human colony. Why would they hit that? You rescued me. You bonded with me. That's enough. He swore under his breath. They're going to wipe out thousands just because I didn't let you die. Yes. God, I didn't even get a thank you. Syraxa turned to him. Her eyes burned faintly, not with fury but resolve. We can stop them, but we need to reach the memory spire. It holds the master code for the entire fleet. Memory spire? Kyle repeated. That sounds like the kind of place where people go to have visions and die tragically. Usually just visions, she said. The tragic death part is optional. Cale sighed. Then what are we waiting for? She hesitated. You still have a choice. If you come with me now, you'll be hunted forever. You'll be marked as a traitor. He looked at her, this impossibly ancient being with fire in her blood and galaxies in her voice, and grinned. Lady, I've already been called worse. Let's go screw up some galactic murder plans. She nodded. The war chamber shimmered as the portal activated. As they stepped through, Cale muttered, I really hope the spire has snacks. I skipped breakfast. Syraxa smiled faintly. You won't like Varen food. Oh, I don't know. I'm pretty open-minded. Unless it moves, or talks back, or tries to extract my memories. They vanished in a blaze of light, leaving behind only flickering schematics and a minibar that, as it turned out, didn't even serve whiskey. The portal dropped them in the middle of a storm. Cal hit the ground with the same enthusiasm he applied to everything lately, exhausted, sarcastic, and slightly airborne. He groaned as his shoulder met stone, rolled and landed in a puddle of what might have been rain, or possibly the tears of a weeping dimension. The sky above them wasn't so much a sky as it was a rolling field of electrical thought, lightning webbed across clouds like neurons firing in anger, and the ground, cracked obsidian and luminous moss, hummed with residual static. So, Kyle said, sitting up slowly, next time we travel through a portal, can we check the Yelp reviews first? This is the outer rim of the Spire's defense network, Syraxa replied, standing beside him with absolutely no mud on her boots, which was either sorcery or a personal insult. We'll have to walk the rest of the way. Of course we will, Cal muttered. Nothing says galactic importance like no parking. In the distance, a structure rose like a blade plunged into the heart of the world. It shimmered with no visible lights, yet glowed from within, pale and flickering, like a memory recalled imperfectly. The spire wasn't just tall, It was dimensional, shifting. As Kale watched, parts of it moved without moving, sliding across angles that didn't exist, folding across geometry that would make an architect cry blood. He rubbed his eyes. Okay, either that thing is violating the laws of physics, or I'm extremely sleep-deprived. Yes, Syraxa said. Comforting. The terrain between them and the spire was no better. Tendrils of half-living flora reached up like lazy snakes, pulsing faintly with a bioluminescence that seemed friendly until one of them tried to taste Kale's boot. He yelped and kicked it away. Is this intelligent? Barely, Syraxa said. This ecosystem was grown as a deterrent, semi-sentient, very territorial, easily confused. Kyle eyed the tendrils. So basically, like my old roommate. They started forward, the spire looming closer with every squelching step. The moss underfoot tried to rearrange itself. Kyle tried to step where it hadn't, which quickly became a game of interdimensional hopscotch. At one point, a puff of spores burst in his face and tried to convince him his name was now Kevin. Syraxa waved a hand and the spores wilted, sulking. I don't think your planet likes me, Kyle said. You're not on a planet, she said. This is a cradle construct, half artificial, half designed from psychic terraforming principles. Of course it is, Kale muttered. Why build a bridge when you can confuse reality into compliance? They reached the spire's base just as the storm above flickered into silence. The clouds froze mid-boil, the lightning paused, and something unseen opened its eye. Kyle could feel it, pressure in his skull, like being judged by an ancient librarian with no patience for late returns. Do I need to say please? He asked. No, Syraxa replied. You need to not exist. That seems unachievable. The spire responded with a soundless pulse. A gateway unfolded before them. No moving parts, just an absence of resistance where there hadn't been one before. It was shaped like a thought. That was the only way Kale could explain it. Like it hadn't been built, but remembered into being. Syraxa stepped inside without hesitation. Kale followed because at this point he'd either gone mad, or fallen in love, or both. And really, what was the difference anymore? The interior was a memory field. They walked through chambers filled with hovering moments, floating scenes made of light and data. Echoes of conversations, old battles, coronations, betrayals. Each one suspended like an insect in amber, looping silently. Kyle stopped beside one, a younger Syraxa arguing with someone who looked like a Varan war priest. Her face was flushed, her fists clenched. The memory flickered as she slammed her hand on a console and shouted something the scene refused to voice. He turned to Syraxa. You've always been difficult, huh? I never liked being told what I was. Yeah, Kyle said, moving on. That tracks. Deeper in, the memories changed. Human soldiers, prisoners, dissections. Kyle's stomach turned. They studied us, he said quietly. Not just observed. They broke us apart. They wanted to learn how you resisted, she said. Why you thrived in chaos. Why you weren't afraid of extinction. I am afraid, Kale said. We all are. We just keep going anyway. That's what makes us ridiculous and amazing. They arrived at the spire's heart, a sphere suspended in a net of golden filaments, each one pulsing with stored thought. This was the core, the command node. Syraxa stepped forward and extended her hand. The filaments reached for her like eager roots. They wrapped around her arm, her throat, her temples. She went rigid, eyes glowing from within. Kyle stood back, rifle half raised in reflex, even though he knew it wouldn't help if something went wrong. He hated being the bodyguard of a goddess in mid-ascension. Anything I can do? He asked. Don't sneeze, her voice echoed, though her mouth didn't move. Good note. A low tone filled the chamber. Kale's implants buzzed in sympathy. A voice, ancient and weary, filled the space. Identification, blood code match. Access level, sovereign prime. Query, command intent. Syraxa spoke, her voice echoing in dozens of dialects. Suspend VAR protocol, lock fleet, redirect targeting systems, initiate override, Queen's mercy. Processing. The air went still, the lights dimmed, then everything shattered, not physically but perceptually. The spire screamed. Kyle staggered back. The filaments convulsed, recoiling from Saraxa as if burnt. She collapsed to her knees, smoke curling from her skin. Kyle ran to her. "What happened? You okay?" "They changed it," she whispered. "They changed the core." "Changed it how?" "The system doesn't recognize me anymore. It's rejecting me." Kyle looked at the golden threads, now writhing like angry worms. "Can you fix it?" "No," she said. "But you can." He blinked. "Come again." "You've been bonded to me. You altered the chain of logic. The system sees you as a new variable, a balancing anomaly." Kyle looked at the sphere. "Are you saying I'm the password now?" "Yes." "Oh no, that's a terrible idea." "You've had worse." "Fair." He stepped forward. The filaments reached for him cautiously, like vines trying to decide if a squirrel was worth the trouble. One of them touched his wrist. Everything went white. He stood in a sea of starlight. Alone. And then something stepped out of the void. It looked like him, but older, tired, grinning in a way that made him deeply suspicious. "Welcome," it said. "You're about to make a decision that will either save a galaxy or punch it in the face. Possibly both." Kyle sighed. "Always nice to meet a future version of myself that's just as sarcastic." The avatar grinned wider. "Now let's teach these tyrants what real chaos looks like." The light receded like a curtain pulled by invisible hands, and Kale found himself back in the spire's core, knees buckling under the sudden gravitational honesty of reality. The golden filaments snapped taut around his body for a moment, testing, calculating, maybe just trying to see if he tickled, before they retracted, leaving behind a lingering warmth and a small dose of what felt disturbingly like mild judgment. Saraxa lay slumped against the wall, eyes half-lidded, her silver hair matted with sweat. Her long ears twitched faintly, which Cal chose to interpret as a good sign, since she had previously stated they only did that when her body was rebooting after extreme stress. That, or she was about to sneeze with cosmic force. Either way, he squatted beside her. "Hey," he said, nudging her shoulder gently. "We're still alive," which feels like a bold oversight on the universe's part. She opened one eye. "You did it?" "Well, I didn't spontaneously combust, so either I did it or I failed so spectacularly, the system just gave up and let me win out of pity." The filaments pulsed once, then receded into the walls. The spire groaned, a sound like tectonic plates sharing bad news, and then a low chime echoed through the chamber. FLEET override confirmed. VAIR protocol suspended. Sovereign directive reinstated. Cal sat down, legs splayed out, staring at the ceiling. "I don't want to alarm you," he said, "but I might be a space messiah now." "You are not a messiah," Saraxa said, groaning as she pulled herself upright. "Yeah, well, the system sure seemed to like my DNA-flavored interference." "Because you're anomalous," she said, "not divine." Tomato. Either way, I just hacked a millennia-old murder fleet with the power of free will and bad life choices. "You make heroism sound like indigestion," Kale winked. "It usually feels like that too." A narrow doorway opened across the chamber, and beyond it lay a hall bathed in white starlight. The floor shimmered like a lake's surface at dawn, and for the first time since they'd entered the spire, Kale felt a distinct lack of ominous humming or metaphysical judgment, which was, frankly, a little disconcerting. They limped together through the passage. At the end waited a console, sleek, minimal, with 3 glyphs hovering above it. Saraxa gestured toward them. "This is where the new directive is set. You decide the future shape of the fleet." Kyle squinted. Wait, me?" "You activated the override. You're recognized now. More than I am." He raised a hand. "I don't know if you noticed, but I barely graduated soldier school. My major was shoot the thing until the beeping stops. And yet here we are." He eyed the glyphs. Each represented a path. The first burned red, a total shutdown of the fleet. Disarmament, the end of Varen power. The second glowed blue, a reformation directive. Keep the ships, but convert them to defensive aid across neutral sectors. Humanitarian space cops, essentially. The third shimmered in strange, shifting colors. It was labeled only Ascendancy Protocol. He stared at that one. What's ascendancy protocol? He asked. Saraxa didn't answer immediately. That was the plan for universal dominance, a utopia born from perfect control. My mother's vision? Beautiful, terrifying, flawless, on paper. Kel snorted. Paper tends to be bad at reflecting genocide. He looked back at the options. Okay, he said, let's think this through. First option, total shutdown. That's good in theory, but if someone else finds the core later, there's nothing to stop them from rebooting it with their own directive, right? Correct, Saraxa said. Second option sounds decent. Guard dogs instead of war machines. She nodded. The programming would shift to protection algorithms. No conquest, just defense. And the third? You activate ascendancy. It wipes every organic override and hard codes loyalty to the bloodline, including me. Kyle blinked. That includes, like, mind control loyalty? Total submission. Wow, tempting, but I've seen that movie. Ends badly. He reached out, hand hovering between the blue and red glyphs. His finger inched toward the blue. Then he paused. Wait a minute, he said. I don't remember seeing a save and backup settings button. What if this console breaks later? Saraxa tilted her head. It doesn't. Okay, but can we at least put a sticky note here? Do not touch unless you want to be emperor, or something? With a deep breath, he tapped the blue glyph. The spire hummed, not with malice or menace this time, but something almost musical. The glyphs sank into the console. A series of pulses raced through the surrounding chamber, and far above, on every Varen ship, every satellite, every embedded beacon across the stars, systems blinked again, and realigned. Directive update complete. Ascendancy terminated. Peace enforcement fleet online. Kale exhaled. There, now nobody gets to be a god. Saraxa looked at him, head tilted. You do realize you just created the most powerful interstellar HOA in history. I'm counting on the paperwork to scare off any megalomaniacs. A soft tone alerted them to a new presence. The holographic image of a fleet commander appeared before them. Varen, old, eyes sharp. Queen Saraxa, he said. And companion. Kyle gave him a little wave. Fleet directive confirmed. New parameters acknowledged. Standing by for orders. Saraxa stepped forward. Begin redistribution. Emergency aid to human colonies threatened by the VAIR protocol. Medical units to Navarra. Supply drops to the Drenthi orbiters. No weapons transfers without my seal. The commander bowed. As you command. The image vanished. Kyle looked at her. That felt good. Useful? Powerful, he said. But the kind of powerful where you actually help people. You know, like heroes do. She gave him a small smile. Strange concept. You'll get used to it. They turned back toward the hallway. The storm outside had calmed. The tendrils in the moss no longer reached for them, just swayed gently, like flowers in a forgiving breeze. As they walked back out into the light, Kyle glanced at Saraxa. So, what now? Want to grab lunch? Take over a star system? Hit up a karaoke bar? She raised a brow. What is karaoke? Oh, you'll love it, Kyle said, grinning. It's how humans take over emotionally. The moons over Vare Prime were calmer now. Where once hung battleships like metal vultures, there were only soft stars and satellite blooms. Tiny medical vessels, climate drones, harvest skiffs pinging harmlessly through the upper thermosphere. The planet's surface, once scorched and stained from decades of war, now pulsed with slow regrowth. Black forests reclaiming old bombardment zones. Crystal coral reclaiming the acid lakes. Kyle stood on the balcony of a high spire. This one less dramatic than the last, mostly because it had an espresso bar and working plumbing, and watched the light roll over the horizon like someone had spilled warm honey across the sky. Behind him, Saraxa was arguing with a holotable again. Number? Absolutely not. I don't care if the humans want to name the relief frigate Blood Angel 5. It sounds like an intergalactic garage band. Kyle sipped his drink. It kinda does. Maybe they'll start doing concerts. Space rock is due for a comeback. Saraxa turned toward him with a look that was equal parts ancient royalty and exasperated girlfriend. Why do humans insist on giving everything names that sound like soft drink flavors? You're one to talk. You once commanded a cruiser called the Obsidian Womb. That was poetic. That was terrifying. I had nightmares about it laying eggs on Europa. She rolled her eyes but stepped up beside him, brushing her arm against his. Her long ears twitched faintly in the wind, catching the ambient whisper of drones passing high above. It had been 3 months since they left the spire. 3 months of treaties, recalibrations, sudden surges in galactic bureaucracy. Siraxa had taken her place again, not as queen, not exactly, but as something new. Sovereign advocate, a diplomat between species, a sort of galactic matriarch with very strong opinions on space ethics and a total inability to remember the names of human months. Kale, meanwhile, had become something else. He wasn't military anymore, but he still wore his old jacket, just without the rank stripes. People listened when he spoke now, sometimes too much. A small child had once asked him to bless their hover skate. He'd awkwardly signed it and told the kid to wear elbow pads, but he'd grown. Not taller to his disappointment, but wiser maybe. At the very least, he knew when to shut up, which for a human soldier turned universal savior was growth enough. You're thinking too loud again, Siraxa said. I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. You know, big picture. Well, she said, there's the delegation from Ruzkar 4 arriving tonight, and they bring nectar. Also, tentacles. Some combination of those two things. Kyle gave her a look. That sounds like a nightmare or a weird Saturday. They're surprisingly charming. And after that, she shrugged, there's always more. Peace is never a finish line. It's a daily sprint, like coffee or escaping black holes. You ever think about just disappearing, he asked, letting the diplomats handle the world saving, go live on a moon somewhere, farm space potatoes, that kind of thing? She laughed, sharp and silver-edged. You're more likely to die of boredom than starvation, though I admit the idea has its charm. Kyle looked at her, really looked. The fangs had receded to a subtle gleam beneath her lip. The aura of doom had relaxed into something almost regal, and her gaze, it had softened. Still sharp, yes, still laced with the weight of centuries and the memory of blood. But there was warmth there now, humor, hope even. I think I like this version of you, he said. I am not a version, she replied. I am a culmination. Exactly. And this culmination, has she ever considered karaoke? Siraxa groaned. Still with the karaoke? I told you, it's the true test of character. Can you stand under neon lights, with the lyrics to galactic love ballads scrolling in broken English, and sing like no one's judging you? I once shattered a senator's skull with a high-pitched war cry that melted steel. Kale grinned. So, you'd be great at the high notes. She stared at him for a long moment. Fine, she said finally, but I picked the first song. Deal. They stood there in the quiet again, watching the stars begin to bleed into view. Far below, hovercrafts zipped between green-lit towers. Somewhere, someone was laughing. Somewhere, someone else was rebuilding. The galaxy spun on, no longer aimed toward domination or destruction, but something messier, truer. Behind them, the holotable pinged, a message. Incoming transmission, Earth Council. Kyle winced. Do I have to? Yes, they like you. They're calling you the Defender of the Dust Queen. That sounds like a romance novel. It is. There's already fan fiction. Kyle turned slowly. You're kidding. I read one, she said deadpan. You were much taller, also inexplicably shirtless for most of the climax. He groaned into his hands. This is my legacy. Not saving an alien queen, not halting a death fleet. Just space Fabio. I think you should be flattered. I think I need stronger coffee. They walked back into the chamber together. The old tension now softened by months of close quarters and unspoken understanding. Kel wasn't just a savior anymore. Siraxa wasn't just a queen. They were something else now. Two strange, stubborn people in the slow, awkward business of making the galaxy better. He glanced at her as the transmission opened. Earth's diplomatic hologram flickered to life. Some ambassador in a suit that looked ironed by a black hole. Kel cleared his throat. Hello again, it's Kale. Yeah, the human. Just wanted to say, we're listening. And yes, the queen is with me. And no, she doesn't sparkle. Saraxa leaned in, eyes gleaming. Yet, she whispered. Kyle snorted. The ambassador blinked. Excuse me? Nothing, Kyle said. Let's begin. The end.